United States is trespassing. The administration of President Barack Obama is openly backing Castro's regime. Leading United States generals are slandering, wanting, persecuting, and jailing Cuban exiles. They are acting as Castro mercenaries. United States has become the worst enemy of Cuban people freedom and independence. At this moment of United States betrayal, Cuban people should remember the last letter of Cuban national hero, José Martí, and his readiness to die fighting against oppressors and mercenaries of all kind. Following José Martí's last letter to his friend Manuel Mercado. Letter to Manuel Mercado. Martí's letter to Manuel Mercado was never completed, as the apostle was killed in battle at Dos Rios the next day. Dos Rios Camp, May 18, 1895. Mr. Manuel Mercado. My dearest brother. Now I can write, now I can tell you how tenderly, and gratefully, and respectfully I love you, and that home which I consider my pride and responsibility. I am in daily danger of giving my life for my country, and duty, for I understand that duty, and have the courage to carry it out, the duty of preventing the United States from spreading through the Antilles, as Cuba gains its independence, and from overpowering with that additional strength our lands of America. All I have done so far, and all I will do, is for this purpose. I have had to work quietly, and somewhat indirectly, because to achieve certain objectives, they must be kept under cover. To proclaim them for what they are would raise such difficulties that the objectives could not be attained. The same general and lesser duties of these nations such as yours and mine, that are most vitally concerned with preventing the opening in Cuba by annexation on the part of the imperialist from there, and the Spaniards, of the road that is to be closed, and is being closed with our blood, annexing our American nations to the brutal and turbulent North which despises them, prevented their apparent adherence and obvious assistance to this sacrifice made for their immediate benefit. I have lived in the monster, and I know its entrails. My sling is David's. At this very moment, some days ago, amid the cheers of victory with which the Cubans saluted our free departure from the mountains where the 6 men of our expedition walked for 14 days, a correspondent from the Herald, who tore me out of the hammock in my hut, told me about the annexationist movement. He claimed it was less to be feared because of the unrealistic approach of its aspirants, undisciplined or uncreative men of a legalistic turn of mind, who in the comfortable disguise of their complacency, or their submission to Spain, half-heartedly ask it for Cuba's autonomy. They are satisfied merely that there be a master, Yankee, or Spanish, to support them, or reward their services, as go-betweens with positions of power, enabling them to scorn the hard-working and creative hordes of Negroes and white men. And that Herald correspondent, Eugene Bryson, told me more about a Yankee syndicate, endorsed by the customs authorities, who are too closely associated with the rapacious Spanish banks to be involved with those of the North, a syndicate fortunately unable, because of its sinewy and complex political structure, to undertake or support the idea as a government project. And Bryson continued talking although the truth of his reports could be understood only by a person with first-hand knowledge of the determination with which we have mustered the revolution, of the disorganization, indifference, and poor pay of the untried Spanish army, and of Spain's inability to gather, in or out of Cuba, the resources to be used against the war, resources which it had obtained the time before from Cuba alone. Bryson recounted his conversation with Martinez Campos, at the end of which Martinez Campos gave him to understand that, at the proper time, Spain would doubtless prefer to come to terms with the United States and hand the island to the Cubans. And Bryson had still more to tell me about an acquaintance of ours whom the North is grooming as a candidate from the United States for the presidency of Mexico when the term of the president now in office expires. I am doing my duty here. The Cuban War, a reality of higher priority, and the vague and scattered desires of the Cuban and Spanish annexationists, whose alliance with the Spanish government would only give them relative power, has come to America in time to prevent Cuba's annexation to the United States, even against all those freely used forces. The United States will never accept from a country at war, nor can it incur the hateful and absurd commitment of discouraging, on its account, and with its weapons, an American war of independence, for the war will not accept annexation. And Mexico, will it not find a wise, effective, and immediate way of helping, in due time, its own defender? It will indeed, or I shall find one for it. This is a life and death matter, and there is no room for error. The prudent way is the only way worth considering. I would have found it, and proposed it. But I must have more authority placed in me, or know who has it, before acting or advising. I have just arrived. The formation of our utilitarian yet simple government can still take 2 more months, if it is to be stable and realistic. Our spirit is one, the will of the country, and I know it. But these things are always a matter of communication, influence, and accommodation. In my capacity as representative, I do not want to do anything that may appear to be a capricious extension of it. I arrived in a boat with General Maximo Gomez, and 4 others. I was in charge of the lead oar, during a storm, and we landed at an unknown quarry, on one of our beaches. For 14 days, I carried my rifle and knapsack, marching through bramble patches, and over hills. We gather people along the way. In the benevolence of men's souls I feel the root of my affection for their suffering, and my just desire to eliminate it. The countryside is unquestionably ours to the extent that in a single month I could hear but one blast of gunfire. And at the gates of the cities we either won a victory, or reviewed 3,000 troops, in the face of an enthusiasm resembling religious fervor. We continued on our way to the center of the island, where, in the presence of the revolution which I instigated, I laid aside the authority given me by the settlements brought and acknowledged by the island, and which an assembly of delegates from the Cuban people, revolutionaries in arms, must replace in accord with the new conditions. The revolution desires complete freedom in the army, without the obstacles previously raised by a chamber, without real sanction, without the distrust of its republicanism, by a suspicious faction of the young, and without the jealousy and fears, which could become too great a threat in the future, of a punctilious or prophetic leader. But at the same time, the revolution is eager for a concise and respectable Republican representation, the same decent spirit of humanity, filled with a desire for individual dignity, in representing the Republic, as that which encourages and maintains the revolutionaries in this war. As for me, I realize that a nation cannot be led counter to, or without the spirit that motivates it. I know how human hearts are inspired, and how to make use of a confident and impassioned state of mind to keep enthusiasm at a constant pitch, and ready for the attack. But with respect to forms, many ideas are possible, and in matters of men, there are men to carry them out. Do you know me? In my case, I defend only what I consider a guarantee of, or service to, the revolution. I know how to disappear. But my thoughts will never disappear, nor will my obscurity leave me embittered. The moment we take shape, we will proceed. Trust this to me, and to others. And now, having dealt with national interests, I will talk about myself, since only the emotion of this duty could raise from a much-desired death the man who, now that Najar does not live where you can see him, knows him better, and cherishes as his heart's delight that friendship with which you fill him with pride. I know his silent gestures of annoyance after my voyage, and however much we told him, from the bottom of our hearts, there was no response. What a fraud he is, and how callous that soul of his, that the honor and tribute of our affection has not moved him to write one more letter on the paper of the maps or newspapers that fill our day. There are affections of such fragile honesty. End of the letter. Jose Marti was shot to death before ending the letter to his friend Manuel Mercado.